How do we come to know and understand the interests and perspectives of our fellow citizens, particularly those whose views and experiences differ significantly from our own? In principle, the answer is simple: through dialogue, which means literally through words. Over the past few years, we've become very interested in the lack of opportunities for rich and meaningful dialogue in society, particularly around controversial social issues. As researchers, we've been intrigued by the prospect that such dialogue, if it occurred and if we could study it, might offer important insights about some of our most significant social challenges.
The film that you're about to watch is entitled Venus and Mars. It deals with a controversial recommendation not to fund a new diabetes drug on the public formulary. The drug is called Lantus, or insulin glargine. And the film was produced with funding from the Canadian Agency for Drugs and Technologies in Health.
I'm in a very major gatekeeper role, so I have no discomfort with blocking access to something that is completely inappropriate or cost ineffective. You have to get yourself by that.
When I decide what to prescribe for a patient, I don't look at what's better for populations as a whole, and I don't look at the pharmacoeconomic issues. I look at what's best for the patient sitting beside me in the consulting room. And that's the only way in which I base my decisions. I feel as a physician, my responsibility is to the person sitting beside me. It's not to the federal government, it's not to a Ministry of Health, it's not to an insurer. And if I have a therapy that is going to be better for an individual, I will recommend that to them.
It's interesting that glargine was a very difficult decision, so I think it's an excellent one to actually study.
It's just this terrible tension between trying to decide, is this a good way to use our money? And it's oftentimes confusing to me who should be deciding, is this a good idea or not? It's a difficult decision to make.
I guess my perspective is that I'm very grateful that we have public health funding, and that I'm also aware of the fact that it cannot be infinite.
We're going to be dealing with Venus and Mars. We come at things from such a different angle. I knew that it was going to be really hard to find synergy there, ultimately. Certainly not convergence.
I usually describe myself in 3 domains. One is the practicing physician, so that's one perspective. Second probably would be sitting on every drug reimbursement committee. Then the third perspective would be my background as a clinical pharmacologist.
I'm a general internist by background. I started practicing as an internist back in 1985. And after a few years, I tailored my practice towards endocrine disease, and in particular diabetes. Diabetes, sort of from my perspective, is the quintessential eternal medicine disease because it affects people head to toe.
I'm a research scientist at the Center for Research on Inner-City Health at St. Michael's Hospital. I also teach health economics at the University of Toronto, and I am the head of the Pharmacoeconomics Research Unit at Cancer Care Ontario.
My husband developed juvenile diabetes, so there's a really very close and intimate connection with medication and the like. I am also, in general terms, interested in being an active citizen.
I don't take it very well when physicians tell me we shouldn't be considering cost effectiveness, or we considering budgets, because it's just completely foreign to everything we do. Everybody has a budget, everybody has a household budget. So why in a different domain when it's someone else's money, all of our money, all of a sudden you should say there's no ceiling and you spend what you want? Just seems kind of ludicrous. So I guess the philosophical underpinnings, which are probably important to ask of everybody, of mine are, this is the public purse we're dealing with, this is everyone's money, in contrast to the private world, where they clearly have to act on behalf of their shareholders. I think we have a real duty to act on behalf of the public. and to spend that money wisely. Cost effectiveness really is a major consideration in the Canadian context now for the Common Drug Review. So that goes from Health Canada to CADTH, which is the Agency of Drugs and Technologies in Health, and the branch of CADTH that looks at drugs is the Common Drug Review. So then CADTH is the committee, Canadian committee I'm part of, that advises the Common Drug Review. And that's the first time really the product is looked at in detail for cost effectiveness, and then a pharmacoeconomic review. And often, you know, that's where drugs that still look fairly good at a Health Canada level get stopped. And that's why we don't fund them, because compared to products that we have, they have to show additional value for money.
The onus is on me as a healthcare provider to recommend to patients what's best for them, in my estimation. And cost is an important thing, but that's a secondary thing. The most important thing is to keep people healthy.
It's not like the drug doesn't work and that's why they said no. It could be the drug does work, but it's been priced in such a way, or the extra cost is so high that it doesn't represent a good use of money. So do you say no to something that works, that will make people better? Or do you say, yeah, we're going to see if we can use our money in a better way to get more health?
I'm thinking that if this was a real miracle drug that provided medicated advances and progress that were beyond anything we have presently, if those kind of things were there, I would say cost has a very different placement. It's a cost that seems to have a different justification.
The biggest issue with glargine was that here's a product that cannot show that it's better, superior to the drugs, the longer acting drugs that we have already, or the basal insulins that we use already, and there is a lot of debate about whether that's true, but when we looked at the totality of the evidence, which almost nobody else has access to, it certainly wasn't convincing that was superior, but it was 3 times the cost. You know, so in that world, if you don't think the drug is superior and it's 3 times the cost, the decision is extremely easy.
One of the first patients that I switched to insulin glargine was a gentleman who had had diabetes for about 52 years, type 1 diabetes, long-standing. And it was that patient that a month later came back, and the wife was literally euphoric. She could have hugged me. She was so excited. And she couldn't wait to tell me about the change in their life, how she was finally able to sleep at night. I remember it like yesterday that she said that she used to wake up on the hour feeling her husband's back to make sure it wasn't sweaty, and if it was, she would shake him and wake him up and say, "What the heck's going on?" And often he was just sweating because he was sweating. But sometimes he was hypoglycemic. And the comfort that they achieved was phenomenal, just by the simple fact of changing their insulin. Nothing else had changed, but just that.
If it's voted down, so glargine obviously was, the company can come back with new information, which if it's gone through CDR, so there's a process for that. If it's gone through CDR, there's new information come to light, new trials, it has to go back to CDR again. But basically it cycles again and again until the company basically gives up. They can come with a new price at any time. So right now in Ontario, there's X number of open files of drugs that they're negotiating, largely negotiating on price with, you know, the guidance that the committee has given. It's up to the companies to bring it though, and then to keep, you know, if they want to bring more evidence or alter the price or keep negotiating, then it's up to them to do it.
When you try to make a decision based on whether this represents good value for money or not, that's when the values come in.
When I recognize in interest as a citizen and somebody who has an interest, that this is very, it's a real dilemma how to come to a formula or a decision or a process or a framework where this can be taken into account and is working properly for most people.
Having personal experience is good and bad. As I said earlier, the fact that the first patient I ever saw on Lantus insulin had such an amazingly positive outcome, that has influenced me. And I'm not saying that's purely scientific. That's not. Obviously, we're influenced by both the literature we review and also our personal experience. But again, I would hope that the people on that organization include active clinicians who see lots of patients, because I think that they not only would be influenced by those patients with whom they're interacting, but additionally, when they read the science, I think they could be influenced in that direction as well.
That difficulty in deciding whether something's worth it or not, that difficulty in deciding whether society wants to pay for something or not, that decision might best be handled by a group that is representative of society.
It's probably useful to know that both CADTH and Ontario have 2 public members as well. So it's not that the public is shut out. You could say, well, 2 out of 12 is not very much, but actually they have a significant voice around, sort of representing the public, representing patients, and they are voting members.
Well, I made a note here, 12, and 2 of them are of public nature, whatever that means, and are voting as well. I don't know whether that's a good representation and proportion or not, but I noticed it because of the low number.
The public in general is extremely reasonable, and we're Canadians, so we're used to kind of a Canadian healthcare mentality that it's it's not just all for one, but we're all in this together, and there are real notions of equity.
I think it's fine for organizations, for bodies that make these determinations to do so, even if I oppose or reject what their conclusions are, except there should be provisions. It should be recognized that if you're making decisions for global implementation, national implementation, that there's going to be many people that don't fit the model that you use to make that determination. There's many people who are outside of that range. They're outliers, for whom that decision isn't appropriate.
It requires an awful lot of understanding to be a valuable member of a board, of a panel like this. I know this from work I do in other areas, and so I would say just throwing another person in for the body count is not my idea, but having somebody that can represent that public view and is already well versed or comes from a certain place of a contribution might be helpful.
I've thought you need clinical people to be able to help you understand the extra patient outcome. And you need people who are good at adding to understand the costs. And you need people who are good at math to be able to divide the extra cost by the extra effect. But once you have that number, is there any special skill you need to have to know whether society thinks that's worth it or not? If it's society's money that's going to pay for this treatment, and if you've contributed some of it, shouldn't you have some say over how that money is spent? I don't know what the exact correct process is, but I think it will make things easier if it's a decision we all make together.
How about a sick person? How about somebody who is depending on these kind of outcomes? And at the same time also somebody who struggles, I'm going to be bleeding heart here, somebody who struggles to make their ends meet and feel that they've already been taxed enough, and I don't want to, who's healthy and doesn't have a thought about tomorrow, because again, this being a public funded organization, it has a different position in the public and in our lives. The recognition of this being not an entitlement but rather a privilege, I'd like to see that somehow represented by the people who get to speak up as well.
In the end of the day, if what we do doesn't stand up in the court of public opinion, then I think we're really in trouble. Because I think in healthcare, it is a public good. It's paid for by the taxes, so it has to stand up.